Hello and welcome. I'm Ankit and this is the Daily News Simplified of 21st of February. Now over the course of next 50 minutes or so, we'll be covering 8 important articles. The first article is a detailed discussion on Panchayati Raj institutions because the Hindu newspaper covered an op-ed on this article. Also, this particular part of the syllabus, that is Panchayati Raj institutions, they form a core part of polity section. Hence, this particular topics become important from mains perspective. Then, we will proceed to the second article of the day, which is covered in all three newspapers, and it is on the issue of extending reservation benefits to the Maratha community in Maharashtra. And we'll discuss in detail why or how has Maharashtra government extended these reservation benefits to the Maratha community. Then we'll discuss in detail an op-ed which is there in the Indian Express newspaper. Now this op-ed is written by a member of a Kisan union and he gives good argument supporting the benefits of legalizing MSP. Then we'll proceed to the fourth article of the day which discusses in detail why Indians often fall ill because of influenza virus. Hence, we'll look at causative factors and we'll also discuss a way forward. So, what to do in order to minimize the risk of Indian people of these influenza virus. Then we'll discuss the fifth article which provides a judicial opinion on exercise of free speech. Because on one hand, Indian constitution gives the state to reasonably restrict our exercise of free speech, while on the other hand, these restrictions should be reasonable. And hence, what qualifies reasonable and unreasonable will go into detail. Then we'll move on to Article 142 of the Indian Constitution. Because yesterday, this article was used by the Supreme Court of India to invalidate the previously held Chandigarh mayor election. And also the Supreme Court, it ordered a recount of the elections. Hence, we'll discuss what is the power of Supreme Court under this very article. Also, we'll take a look at Hoolock gibbon, which is a species of ape. And we are discussing this article because the Hindu news paper in its last page covers a beautiful photo of a Hoolock gibbon species. And also this particular news article, it becomes important because UPSC from time to time, it asks questions on various important species that have been covered in news. Then, in the last article, we'll deal with relics of Lord Buddha because India is looking to send these relics to Thailand on its special request. Hence, without further ado, let us begin our today's discussion. But before beginning, let me reiterate the need for like, share and subscribe of this video as it helps us to keep motivated and also enables our content to reach more and more aspirants. Hence, let us begin with this first news article which you can see appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now this news article, it covers that it has been more than 30 years since Government of India implemented 73rd Amendment Act. Now this Amendment Act, it mandated the third tier of the government, that is local bodies. And in rural areas, we witness Panchayati Raj institutions, which is an example of democratic decentralization. Also, this topic becomes important from mains perspective because first of all, the GS paper to syllabus, it deals directly devolution of power and finances up to local levels. And at local levels, we witness Panchayati Raj institutions in rural areas, whereas in urban areas, we have urban local bodies like municipal corporation and municipalities. But we'll be discussing the detail about Panchayati Raj institutions. And this topic is also important because from this particular slide, you can see that every alternate year, that is 2018 and 2022, there was a question in GS paper 2 in UPSC mains on decentralization of power, local institutions and panchayat system. So this topic is very important from mains perspective. Now let us go into detail. What is this 73rd Amendment Act, which was enacted in the year 1992 by then Prime Minister and his government, that was P.V. Narasimha Rao. Now, this amendment article, it provided for mandatory creation of a rural and urban local body. For example, under Article 243B, it was mandated on the government or state government to constitute a three-tier Panchayati Raj institutions. But whereas in states which have less than 20 lakh of population, these states they can constitute a two-tiered Panchayat system. Also, the powers it needed to be devolved to these Panchayati Raj institutions from a list of powers which was mentioned in the 11th schedule of the Indian Constitution. Now, also, it was difficult to pass this law, so some of the provisions were made mandatory and some other provisions they were made voluntary. Hence, according to the needs and demands of the local government, the state government of a particular state it can enact certain or it can devolve certain powers to these local institutions. Also, this particular amendment act it provided reservation for marginalized section of the society. For example, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, as well as women, they were provided reservation under this particular amendment act. The most important development was that this act provided 33% of reservation for seats for women in not just panchayati institutions but also in offices of panchayat. Whereas in application, many of the states such as Kerala and Bihar, they have provided up to 50% of reservation for women. So you can see it was a very transformative step to provide reservation not just to marginalized section but also to women. Also, this amendment act it provided constitution of a Gram Sabha. Now, what is this Gram Sabha? This Gram Sabha included all the members of a panchayat who are registered in the electoral roll. Now, these members they get together and decide upon various functions of the panchayat. So, in a way, you can say that Gram Sabha it exercises power which is equivalent to it exercises power at village level which is equivalent to power exercised by state legislative assembly at the state level. And in a similar way, at village level, this Gram Sabha discharges its functions and exercises power. Further, who will conduct elections to these local institutions? For this, the Amendment Act it provided establishment or constitution of a state election commission under Article 243K. Now, this state election commission it will be responsible not just for conducting election but will also prevail or prepare electoral rolls. And this electoral roll will constitute every member who is eligible to vote in a state or local level elections. Again, to provide funds to these bodies, it was also envisaged that a state finance commission will be established. And this state finance commission was established under 243 subsection I of the Indian Constitution. Now, the State Finance Commission, it will recommend the state government from time to time what will be the portion of taxes that will be devolved from state government to these local institutions, that is both PRIs and urban local bodies. Hence, you can understand that through establishment of 73rd Amendment Act, the constitution of these Panchayati Raj institutions, it was made mandatory on the state government. Whereas before this 1992, state government, they used to create Panchayati Raj institutions, but it was not mandatory on them. Understood? So let us now understand what are the issues that these functioning of these PRIs face from day to day. Now we'll start off. Now we have divided these issues into three categories. The first is with respect to finances. The second is with respect to the functions or the powers it discharges. And the third is the amount of functionaries that discharge the functions of these PRI bodies. Let us start with funding of these PRI bodies. Now, generally, there are many sources of fund for these PRI bodies. That is, grants are provided to these bodies by central government, and this is provided under Article 280 of the Constitution based on the recommendation of Union Finance Commission. On the other hand, state government, it devolves taxes, and this is done based on the recommendation of State Finance Commission under Article 243I of the Constitution. Further, state government, it also provide these PRIs with grants, and also these grants are given on the basis of the recommendation of State Finance Commission itself. Further, you see that there are many centrally sponsored schemes that are enacted by central government, and the funds to these schemes are also provided by the state government. Now, to implement these schemes at the lowest level, you need to give the body funds, and under these centrally sponsored schemes, the Panchayati Raj institutions, they are also provided with funds from both central and state governments. And in addition to these, the Panchayati Raj institution, they are endowed with powers to impose taxes and other non-tax revenues for discharge of these services. So this is what you can call own revenues of the Panchayati Raj institutions. Now these 5 sources are primarily used to fund any Panchayati Raj institution body. Correct. But in practice, what we have witnessed that these Panchayati Raj institutions, they are reluctant to impose tax on its constituents. Further, they do not provide adequate level of services, so their non-tax collections, they are also quite low. Thereby, in practice, the own revenues, they only meet demands of about 1% of the funds which is required by these bodies. And the rest 99% of funds, they are provided by both central and state governments under various schemes and constitutional provisions. So when 99% of the funds are provided to these PRIs by state and central bodies, naturally the autonomy of these PRIs, they are not adequate. Therefore, whatever funds are provided by central government and state governments, they are what you can call tied in nature. Because the Panchayati Raj institutions, they can only utilize this 99% of the funds for on the purpose that is specified by both central and state governments. So this tied nature of funds, it compromises the autonomy of PRIs, thereby going against the idea which was envisaged in constituting these bodies. Now let us deal with the issues related to discharge of its various functions. For example, you must be aware that state government, it has various bodies. For example, bodies which ensure rural development, or bodies which ensure or which implement provisions or programs meant for irrigation of water. Hence, these state level bodies, they are known as parastatal bodies. And these parastatal bodies, they discharge functions which are originally meant for PRIs. So in this way, when a state level body is discharging a function, it again compromises the autonomy of PRI. Further, I have already told you that Indian Constitution, it provides for a 3-tier level of Panchayati Raj institutions. However, the distribution of functions of these individual layers, it is not done in a scientific manner. So when these distribution of functions, they are not done in a scientific manner, then the on-ground implementation of these very functions, it creates confusion in the eyes of various functionaries. So due to existence of parastatal organizations, as well as non-scientific nature of distribution of functions, it has created problems in discharging of functions by these PRIs. Now let us move to the nature of functionaries of these PRI bodies. Now naturally, these PRIs, they are an elected body. So commoners like you and I, we can become members or office holders of these PRI bodies. Now these office holders, they are not experienced in administrative matters. So thereby, when it comes to implementation of various government programs, these office holders, they do not have any experience. So to provide for functionaries who will implement the provisions, state government, it provides its employees to PRIs on deputation. Now, as you can understand, when a state government employee is on a deputation to PRI, he or she will not be accountable to the Gram Panchayat or Gram Sabha of that very Panchayat, because he is accountable to the state government. So naturally, he will not hear to request of office holders, thereby creating problems in implementation of various schemes. Also, the state governments themselves, they are responsible for hiring staff of PRIs. Now, different states, they have different policies for hiring of staff, which again creates incongruence in implementation of the original idea of implementation of projects at the ground level. Hence, you can understand, in matters of providing funds to the PRIs, in matters of discharging functions of these PRIs, and also the functionaries who discharge these functions, in all these three matters, we have witnessed issues in these institutions. Now, let us understand what should be the ideal way forward in order to enrich or implement the original idea of democratic decentralization. Now, in this regard, Union government back in the first decade of 2000s, it constituted what was known as Second Administrative Reforms Commission. Now, the reform or the report of this commission, it is quite enriched, and it also provides certain suggestions regard to implementation of Panchayati Raj institution. Now, this is an authoritative text. Thereby, recommendations of these particular commissions, they should be cited by aspirants in their answer writing. Now, in this regard, the second ARC, it provided various suggestions for improvement of functioning of PRIs. The first suggestion was that PRIs or state government, it should follow the principle of subsidiarity. Now, what this principle signifies? Now, principle of subsidiarity, it is meant that the discharge of a particular function should be done at the lowest possible level. Hence, if a particular program, it should be implemented at the lowest level of the Panchayat, then you do not need to provide that function to highest level or state government level. Correct? So, this is what you know, the principle of subsidiarity. And in this regard, the second ARC, it recommended state government to ensure the principle of subsidiarity, that on ground implementation should be take place at the lowest possible level. Further, second ARC, it also recommended clear delineation of powers between various levels of government. For example, there is a need to ensure activity mapping. This means that various activities, it will be mapped and it will be given to a certain level of the Panchayati Raj institution. And those functions will be ensured and will be implemented by that particular level. Hence, when the accountability and functions, they are clearly delineated or marked, it will ensure accountability of that particular level of Panchayat to the people in general. Hence, after clear delineation, the second ARC, it also recommended effective devolution of not just funds but also functions and functionaries. Because to discharge functions, any Panchayati Raj institution, they will require certain functionaries. Hence, in this regard, the Panchayati Raj institutions, it should look to hire functionaries themselves. Further, when these Panchayati Raj institutions, they are enabled to impose both tax and non-tax revenues, it will reduce their dependence on state and central governments. Hence, by ensuring adequate amount of funds by PRIs themselves, it will just bring or it will enrich their autonomy in general. Further, there's also need to encourage participation of women, especially the elected women representatives. Because when we enhance the capacity of these elected women representatives, we will ensure that not just these office holders will discharge their functions effectively, but this will then trickle down to increased women participation in the Gram Sabha. Because then women will be open to suggest reforms and they will be also receptive of the idea that some women representative will hear their grievances. And this will create the ideal levels of democratic decentralization. Because through empowering elected women representatives, we are not just increasing the participation of women in general, we are creating avenues for their empowerment. Also, Panchayati Raj institutions, for effectively discharging their functions, they need an equipped workforce. And in this regard, the state government can undertake trainings of functionaries of Panchayati Raj institutions, both the bureaucrats as well as elected representatives. Further, they should also be provided with digital tools because this is an era of digitalization. Hence, whatever work they can perform digitally, it should be ensured that adequate levels of training as well as infrastructure is provided to these Panchayati Raj institutions for becoming more effective. Also, we need to ensure, or the government needs to ensure, the enhanced efficiency of Panchayati Raj institutions. And in this regard, we can learn from Mission Antyodaya, which was enacted by the government few years before. Now, under this particular mission, what government did was that it enhanced or it provided convergence of various state and central government schemes at the panchayat level. And this was done at the most or the least developed districts in India. Now, this implementation of this Antyodaya scheme, it reaped certain dividends for the least developed regions. And in this regard, the convergence should be ensured at levels of all panchayat. Thereby, by ensuring principles of subsidiary, clearly delineating or marking their functions, ensuring effective devolution of funds to Panchayati Raj institutions, capacity building of elected women representatives, providing them with equipped workforce and enhancing the efficiency of Panchayati Raj institutions is an ideal way forward if we need to meet the ideal goals of democratic decentralization. This was all for first discussion in the mains related section. And with this, we move to the second article of the day. Now, as you can see in this particular slide, the article which deals with providing quotas to Maratha community, it was covered in all these three newspapers, that is the Hindu, Indian Express and the Business Line newspaper. Now, this particular news articles, they report that Maharashtra government, it has extended 10% of reservation benefits in jobs and educational institutions to the community, that is Maratha community. Now, as you can understand, the provisions of reservation, it is provided in the Indian Constitution. Thereby, it is important from GS paper 2 perspective. Also, affirmative action is a key to ensure social and economic development of the marginalized community. Thereby, the topics related to provision of constitutional reservation, it is also covered in the mains, especially in the year 2018. So naturally, this news is important from both prelims and mains perspective. Now we'll try to simplify what the content of these three articles include. Now, Article 15, as you have read, provides for no discrimination on the basis of caste. However, even under Article 14, there are significant provisions such as under Article 15 subsection 4, it provides for reservation to socially and educationally backward classes of citizens. Similarly, Article 15 subsection 5, it also provides reservation to socially and educationally backward communities. So there's a significant exemption which provides for reservation under Article 15. Also, in matters of public employment, Article 16 also provides for no discrimination. However, under Article 16 subsection 4, state can ensure reservation for backward classes of citizen in case they are not adequately represented in the public services. So there are two criteria primarily to extend reservation to a certain community. The first is that that community has to be socially and educationally backward. And the second criteria is that that community is inadequately represented in the public services. Hence, then, when these two categories meet, then only a state or a central government can provide reservation to any community. Now, in this regard, there are strong demands from various states by the dominant communities. For example, Jats in Haryana, Patels in Gujarat, and Marathas in Maharashtra, they have been demanding reservation under various sections of constitution. Now, in this regard, let us discuss what the Maharashtra government has done. Now, earlier, that is twice, Maharashtra government, it extended reservation of some percentage to the members of Maratha community. And the state government, it held that the Maratha community are socially and educationally backward and inadequately represented. However, when it came to proving their inadequate representation and their backwardness, the Maharashtra government was unable to provide adequate data to the judiciary. And in this regard, the judiciary, it invalidated earlier attempts by the Maharashtra government to provide reservations. However, judiciary, it also let the Maharashtra government to collect more and more quantifiable data. And in this regard, the Maharashtra government, it constituted a panel of experts under Justice Shukre panel. Now recently, this panel, it gave report and it held that Maratha community is one of the most backward communities in Maharashtra. For example, the report of this community highlighted that Marathas, they constitute 28% of the state population. And out of this population, 84% of Marathas, they are backward. Why are they backward? Because primarily the Maratha communities are engaged in agricultural activities. Now, because of engaging in agricultural activities, they have witnessed low incomes, fragmentation of their land, and due to this low income and fragmentation of land, it leads to extreme poverty. Now, due to extreme poverty, many of the farmers belonging to Maratha communities have even committed suicide. For example, total of 94% of death by suicide by farmers in Maharashtra, they were done by members of Maratha community. So citing this data, Justice Shukre panel held that this Maratha communities is backward in nature because they are engaged in agricultural activities, which leads to low and little income, which leads to their backwardness. Also, this Justice Shukre panel, it also concluded that Maratha communities, they have a very low representation in public services. And based on the recommendation of Shukre panel, the state government of Maharashtra has now extended 10% of reservation separately. Now, why this reservation was extended separately? Because Marathas, they constitute a very large section of population. Hence, if you provide this large section of population in already existing reservation, it will bring down the total quantum of reservation for marginalized communities. Therefore, Maharashtra government, it has enacted this reservation provision over and above the already existing reservations for SCs, STs and OBCs. Now, this was all for today's discussion on Maratha reservation. And then we'll move on to another op-ed which appeared in the Indian Express newspaper. Now, you can understand that the author of this particular op-ed is a member of a Kisan Sangathan, which means a Kisan organization. Therefore, his or her recommendation will always be in line of that of farmers. However, this op-ed, it also provides various arguments for legalizing MSP. Now, before going into arguments, let us look at the importance of this topic. Now, this topic is important because GS Paper 3 deals directly with issues related to MSP. Further, a question in prelims of the year 2022, it appeared on what do you mean by MSP and how will this MSP rescue the farmers from low income trap. Therefore, this topic is important from mains exam perspective. Now, naturally, Indian farmers, especially farmers from Punjab, they have demanded two things from the government. The first is that government should legally recognize MSP, which means whatever crop is being brought to the government should procure that crop and provide the farmers with MSP, that is minimum support price. And how much MSP will the government provide? In this regard, the farmers has demanded that the government should impose or should fix MSP based on C2 and 50% more than the C2 cost. Now, what is this C2 cost? Let us see this in the next slide. Now, there are three ways a government fixes MSP. The first is that government, it calculates all the inputs that are used by farmers and then reaches out to calculate the MSP, and this is known as an formula which is A2, which means the government calculates the input cost used by farmers to grow their crops, and based on this input cost the final MSP is recommended by the government. Now the second cost, which is known as A2 plus FL cost, and it not just includes input but it also includes the cost of family labor. However, there's also a third cost known as C2 cost, and this includes not just A2 plus FL but it also includes other implied costs, that is cost of rent of land. Now the farmers, they are demanding that government should provide 50% more of what is C2 cost. However, currently government utilizes this A2 plus FL and provides 50% more of this A2 plus FL cost, which is known as MSP by the government. However, farmer, they are of the opinion that government should utilize rather C2, and this will lead to higher or increased MSP for farmers. Now, what are the benefits of legal backing and increased MSP in general? And I've borrowed this suggestion from this very particular news article. The first is that by providing legal backing and increasing the MSP, it will lead to increased income for the farmers. Now, utilizing this increased income, the farmers will then lead to increased demand of goods and services. Now, this increased demand of goods and services will create a multiplier effect on economy, because when there is an increased demand of goods and services, it will be met by increased investment, increased production, which will require more and more employment. And in long term, it will also lead to increase in taxable income for the government. So when the government will increase the income of farmers, it will create more and more demand from the farmers to purchase goods and services. Now, naturally, to meet this increased demand, companies will have to invest more, produce more, and employ more people, which will then generate increased taxes to the government. Further, this article also suggests that providing legal backing to MSP will promote crop diversification, because currently government announces MSP for 23 crops. However, in practice, most of the MSP, it is just cornered by farmers who grow paddy as well as farmers who grow wheat. Thereby, most of the farmers, they are looking to produce just paddy and wheat because the support to these crops are provided under MSP program in general. And this has created what you can call an increased phenomena of growing just paddy and wheat. And this has marginalized other crops in general. However, when government provides legal backing to all these 23 crops, it will promote crop diversification, because then farmers will who are growing paddy and wheat, they'll look to grow other crops such as cotton, oil seeds, as well as pulses. Now as you already know that India currently has a high demand of these oil seeds and pulses. However, India does not is not able to produce these oil seeds and pulses domestically. Therefore, it has to import these oil seeds and pulses from other countries. So, by providing legal backing, we will ensure not just crop diversification but also increase production of oil seeds and pulses, which will help government meet the demands of self-sufficient in agriculture. Further, currently most of the procurement under MSP it is done by the government itself. However, when government provides legal backing, not just government but also private players they have to procure crops and provide these farmers with MSP. Thereby, when the MSP burden will be shared by government and private sector, this will in general reduce the overall fiscal burden on the government, which is currently quite large. Because currently, government is not just required to procure food crops from farmers, but it also has to distribute these food crops over the entire country, which again cost or leads to transportation cost. So by providing legal backing, it will ensure private procurement and then will reduce the fiscal burden on the government, which will be which the money then can be used for other productive work. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on benefits of MSP. Now, with this, let us move to another article which deals with why Indians are falling ill quite often. Now, this article particularly deals with virus which are known as influenza A and influenza B virus, and I have provided various symptoms of these virus in the notes in the comment section or in the description box. You can look at various symptoms of this virus. Now this article it also goes into detail what is creating or what is making Indians vulnerable for these viruses. Now first of all, India as you can understand has a high population density, and due to this high population density you can witness people live and travel in close quarters. For example, in metro trains and buses, people travel in close confinement and in a closed atmosphere, which creates avenues for air to air transmission of these viruses. Further, if Indians they fall sick, most of Indians we self prescribe medicines. And even if we go to a doctor, there are very limited avenues to diagnose the adequate amount of influenza virus in a person. So the doctor he or she relies particularly on use of antibiotics, and this indiscriminate use by of antibiotics by people has created what is known as antimicrobial resistance. And this antimicrobial resistance is also a cost or also a cause of increasing influenza viruses transmission. Also, in general, influenza vaccines are provided all over the world and also in India. However, these vaccines they are not covered under universal immunization program of the government. Therefore, peoples they are not getting vaccinated for these influenza vaccines. Also, with increased phenomena of climate change, we have witnessed frequent and more changes in weather. And because of more changes in weather, people have become more vulnerable to change in weather patterns, and it also leads to them being fall sick of this influenza viruses. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on causative factors of influenza. And with this, we move to another article of the day, which appeared on the op-ed section of the Hindu newspaper. Now, this article it deals with judicial approach on exercise of free speech and what constitutes or not constitutes the reasonable restrictions which government can impose on exercise of this free speech. Now, this article is important from GS paper 2 syllabus because Article 19 of the Indian Constitution it deals with exercise of freedom of speech and expression, which is a significant provision of the Indian Constitution. Further, concept of freedom of speech and expression was also subject of mains of the year 2014. Now let us first understand what are fake news. fake news that defined as deliberate misinformation which is spread with an intention to misinform people. And because of this deliberate spread of fake news, it creates all kind of challenges on a nation. For example, if you spread fake news related to certain religion, it will create social unrest in a society. So to control this social unrest, government will have to impose certain restrictions on economic and political activities. Thereby, the exercise of or the vulnerabilities of fake news on any society is quite huge. Therefore, in this regard, government is looking for various opportunities to curb the spread of this fake news. And in this regard, government has brought forward what is known as Amendment to IT Rules of the year 2021. And in this rule, government has provided that every IT service provider, especially the social media organizations, they have to impose restrictions on spread of fake news. And how will they impose restrictions of spread of fake news? Because government organization, that is a fact check unit, will label any news as a fake news. And when government's own organization, it labels any news as fake news, then the IT service providers, they have to stop the publication of this news. And then according to this article, the High Court of Bombay, it invalidated this particular provision and held that it was unconstitutional. Now, you'll naturally ask a question that whether curbing fake news, isn't it a restrictions on exercise of freedom of speech and expression, which is a fundamental right under Article 19. However, let me tell you that Article 19 also provides the state to impose what is known as a reasonable restriction. Now, state, if it feels that any exercise of freedom of speech, if it has implications on public order, exercise of any profession, then the state can impose restrictions on exercise of Article 19. However, this restriction have to be reasonable and proportionate. And in this regard, the High Court of Bombay, it held that restrictions which was imposed by fact check unit on these IT services companies, they were unreasonable in nature. Because first of all, government itself was describing what is fake and what is not fake, which is in a way arbitrary in nature, and it violates Article 14 of the Constitution. Further, it also violates the exercise of Article 19 subsection G, which provides exercise of any profession by an individual, which is covered under Article 19. Now, when government imposes any restriction on exercise of this professional right, it should be reasonable in nature. For example, if government imposes licensing requirements on doctors, then that is termed as a reasonable restriction, correct? But this imposition of fake news by a fact check unit, it is an unreasonable restriction. Therefore, according to this article, the fact check unit and its labeling of news is an unreasonable restrictions. Therefore, it was invalidated by the High Court. Now, with this, let us move to the prelim centric discussion of the day. The first news article, it appeared in the explained section of the Indian Express newspaper. Now, this particular article, it highlights that Supreme Court and its decision, which was given by a bench comprising of Chief Justice Dr. D.Y. Chandrachud, he or the Supreme Court bench, it utilized powers under Article 142 to invalidate the elections of Chandigarh mayor. Now, the news, which is quite political in nature, it is not important from UPSC perspective. But what is important is Article 142, because this is a significant provision in the Indian Constitution, and it provides, and it is a part of GS paper 2 syllabus. Now, as you can see, Article 142 of the Indian Constitution, it gives power to the Supreme Court to exercise its power to ensure complete justice in any matter. Now, if you can recall yesterday's discussion by Vaibhav sir, he highlighted in its discussion on interstate water dispute that under Article 262, center can pass any law. And in this law, the center has restricted the powers of Supreme Court to discharge functions under interstate water dispute. Now, despite the prohibition on Supreme Court, even then the Supreme Court, it changed the Kaveri Tribunal decision on distribution of Kaveri waters. And how was Supreme Court able to do it? It was using this Article 142 of the Constitution itself. Also, this Article 142 in its subsection 2, it provides Supreme Court the powers to contempt or to ensure punishment in case of contempt on itself. Hence, you can see this Article 142, it provides power not just to do complete justice, but also to punish any person who contempts the court of law. Now, this is a quite famous article and it has been used by Supreme Court from time to time. For example, in Union Carbide Corporation versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court used this very particular article to provide compensation to the victims of Bhopal gas tragedy. Also, in M. Siddiq versus Mahan Suresh Das case, the Supreme Court utilized its power under Article 42 to settle what was known as Ayodhya dispute. Also, you can understand that the powers of a speaker is absolute in case of jurisdiction of anti-defection law, which means that speaker can themselves decide on when or not to or how to disqualify a particular legislator who has been accused of anti-defection law. But Supreme Court, in Keshram Mangal Chand case, it utilized power under Article 142 to give directions to speaker that it should decide on provisions of disqualification under a particular time frame. So you can understand that this article, it not just provides power to the Supreme Court, this power has been utilized effectively by the Supreme Court to ensure complete justice. Now, why are we dealing with this particular news article? Because as you can see in the year 2019, a question directly appeared on Article 142. Hence, let us solve this practice question. The first statement, Article 141 provides Supreme Court with the power to do complete justice. As you can see, the statement is incorrect because it was under Article 142. Also, the second statement, it states that Article 142 provides the Supreme Court with the power to punish for the contempt on itself. Again, this statement is correct because Article 142, subsection 2 provides Supreme Court the power to punish for its contempt. And in this regard, option B is the correct answer to this model question. Now let us move to the next article which appeared in the last page of the Hindu newspaper. Now as you can see from this very particular photograph, it is a photograph of a particular species of eastern hoolock gibbon. Now the hoolock gibbon, it is the only ape which is found in India. These apes, they are confined to 7 states of northeast India and they live in the canopies of evergreen forest. So first of all, you should understand that they live in evergreen forest and they are confined to states in northeast India and not any other part of the country. Further, these species, they are famous for their loud calls which is called as hulu calls. And these hulu calls have been responsible for naming this species as hoolock gibbon. Also, there are 2 species of hoolock gibbons which are found in India. Majority of them, they are of western hoolock gibbon species which are endangered under IUCN Red List, and other species are known as eastern hoolock gibbons which are vulnerable under IUCN Red List. Now in this particular photograph, you can see a picture of a skywalker hoolock gibbon which is a species of Eastern Hulog gibbon. Now, these Eastern Hulog gibbons, they are particularly found in Myanmar as well as China, and a minority of this population, it is can be found in Arunachal Pradesh, that is in Mishmi Hills. Now, there is a one particular important trait about these species, that they live together in monogamous pairs. Hence, they are very territorial in nature and they do not accept other members of the species to encroach upon their territory. And this is a very important trait of this Hulog gibbon species. Now, let us solve a model question which we have curated. And let me tell you that this particular model question was asked in the pre-parikshan test, which was held only last Sunday. So you can understand that the levels of pre-parikshan test is as such that we provide not just important articles, but we also curate questions strictly on the lines of UPSC exam. Now, this particular model question, it was curated on same lines as a question which appeared in 2013 prelims on lion-tailed macaque. Hence, let us solve this model question. The first statement, the Hulog gibbon prefers to live in canopies of evergreen forest in Western Ghats. Now, the first part of the statement is correct because they live in evergreen forest and in their canopies. However, the next part is incorrect because they are confined to Northeast India and not Western Ghats. Therefore, first statement is incorrect. Let us move to second statement. They are the only apes found in India. Now, also this statement is correct because it is the only ape species which are found in India, and also these Hulog gibbons, they live together in monogamous pairs. Thereby, third statement is also correct. Hence, the correct answer to this model question is option B. Now, let us move to the last article of the day, which again appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now, this news article, it is important from GS paper 1 perspective, especially from an art and culture part of the syllabus. Now, India, it houses many relics which are there from the Buddhist era. Now, these relics, they are not provided to any other country. However, Thailand, it has made a special request to India that India should exhibit some relics which are related to Lord Buddha in Thailand itself. And in this regard, this news article appeared today. Now, let us first understand what are these Buddha relics in the first place. Now, this news article, it tells that relics related to Lord Buddha and his disciple, that is Sriputta and Mudal Ganayana, they are being sent to Thailand. Now, what are these relics in the first place? Now, there's a Buddhist text called Mahaparinirbana Sutta, which was covered in Digh Nikaya of the religious text, and it highlights that Lord Buddha, he attained Mahaparinirvana. And after he attained salvation, the body of Lord Buddha, it was cremated. And what was remained was ashes and of the Lord Buddha. Now, this ashes, they were divided by a Brahmin called Drona into 8 important portions. And over these relics, what was erected was stupas. Now, the stupas that were originally erected over the bodily relics of Lord Buddha, it is termed as Saririka stupas or Saririk stupas. And these Saririk stupas, they are the earliest surviving Buddhist shrines in the country. Now, the relics which are provided or which are relics of Lord Buddha, they are known as Kapil Vastu relics because originally they are excavated from Kapil Vastu region, which is currently located in Siddharth Nagar in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Now, this Siddharth Nagar, it is a part of Kapil Vastu region which was ruled by clan known as Sakya clan, and Lord Buddha himself was a member of this particular clan only. Now, these relics, they are termed as AA relics, which means that they are rare in nature. Thereby, the original custodian of these relics are Indian government and government agencies, and they are not provided to any other government in general. However, as Thailand is a close ally to India, therefore on its request, Indian government is looking to provide these relics to Thailand government. Now let us solve this model question which we have curated on the lines of a previous year question back in 2014. The first statement, the relics of Sariputta, who was Lord Buddha's disciple, were enshrined and preserved at Devni Mori. Again, this is an incorrect statement because originally the relics, they were housed in Sanchi, which is in Kapilvastu region. Also, the Saririk stupas are considered as the earliest surviving Buddhist shrines in India, which is a correct statement which I've already highlighted in my previous discussion. The third statement, Kapilvastu relics of Lord Buddha, it belonged to Lichvi clan of Vaishali, which again is an incorrect statement because it belonged to Sakya clan of Kapilvastu region, and the member of this Sakya clan was Lord Buddha himself. Thereby, option A is the correct answer because only one statement, that is statement 2, is correct. Hence, this was all for today's discussion in our Daily News Simplified, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. sharp. Hence, please give me a leave and I wish you a very good night.